Welcome to Whistleblowers in partnership with Wix Trade Pro.
Hello and welcome to Whistleblowers in partnership with Wix. This is the show where we answer questions, get the top line from the journalists in the room and blabber on about whatever we fancy. I'm Gordon Smart, joined by Mark Clattenburg as always, with Ian Ladyman, the terrier of Fleet Street. We're going to start with a quick Q&A today in a bonus episode. One question each. We've got a question for you here, Mark. Have a listen to this.
Mark, what do you think about John Terry?
Where do I start?
Wherever you like.
The thing
Footballers League, you had a scrap with them the other day, didn't you?
Yeah, always scrapping. When he was playing, I had a good relationship. If I played an advantage, he'd come up to you, well done, Mark, for the advantage. I remember sending him off at West Brom and he was waiting for us in my dressing room on my sofa to discuss the red card. So I had that type of relationship. And then the moment we both finish, I don't know if we're both frustrated or whatever, he's become different. And I saw a different side of him in the Bowlers League.
Really?
Where I don't know if he was using his social media platform to try and think he's hard or cocky or whatever, but he was making some comments that were probably not acceptable, and I fired back at him and told him what to fucking do.
Aye.
And I,
But that's
and
the
I,
nature
you
of
know,
that arena,
but,
right?
Yeah, but the thing was, he's telling me about refereeing.
Yeah.
I don't tell him how to take penalties. And if he hadn't missed that one in the Champions League final, there could have been a different... So I don't get personal, but he seems to get quite personal. But we actually got on well again on Monday, where I refereed his team and he challenged an offside and I got it right, and I said, I do get decisions right.
In the clip on Sky Sports, he says, there's no effing point. I've got to do your job for you. I think that was the official quote.
I wish he would, because then he'd probably get more money than me. I'll take his money, he can take my money as a ref.
I think he was frustrated because one of his players was holding him back at one point, wasn't he? He was having a right good pop at you. Have you ever wondered what would happen if that guy just let him go? Did you ever have a proper physical confrontation off the field with anyone?
No, it never gets like it. No, it never gets like it. Sometimes you'd have it in the tunnel, players would argue with you, but not at the highest level. Certainly grassroots level, definitely. Survival on grassroots, in the parks in the north, but not at professional football.
Fair play. So John Terry then, Ballers League is tricky, but actually quite respectful when he was a player.
Always respect him. I thought he was a great player.
So
played with his heart on his sleeve.
Brilliant player. Put his head where you wouldn't put your feet.
Yeah, but he was all, you know, even when I came back after the problem with Oba Mikel, him and Frank Lambert were the first players to come up to us when I went to referee Chelsea again and said, look, Mark, it's bollocks. And I thought, you know what, respect.
I think he was also a slightly better player than people gave him credit for.
I thought he was a great player.
Great player. Great on the ball.
The way he could use
really
the
good
ball.
in the ball, yeah.
I think if you were to, I think most people, if you were to choose a team from the last 20 years, you'd probably be in it.
100%.
Yeah, great centre half. Brilliant in the air. Good with the ball at his feet. Good facing his own goal.
Never injured.
Unbelievable on set pieces as well.
And he was a good leader on the pitch. You could see that Chelsea team were driven by them.
I know it's a bit of a cliche, but we don't mind a cliche on this podcast. I think a little bit of that has been lost from defending in the Premier League. There's such an obsession now with being able to use the ball that I think sometimes the nuts and bolts defenders is used in a disrespectful way, and it shouldn't be. Because at the end of the day, if you've got one of those in your team, you know you've got a good platform. And I think he was amongst the very best when it came to that.
Got some great off the field stories about John Terry. So when I first moved to London, 2000, he would have just been emerging into that Chelsea team, right? But I lived in Epsom, and he's from that neck of the woods. And I had a mate who was playing for Fulham from Scotland, a guy Kieran McInnesby. So we all ended up knocking around together. John Harley, who left Chelsea, went to Fulham. So he knew my mate Kieran. So we were all kicking around together. And my missus was at dance school, a place called Lane Theatre Arts in Epsom. So all these pretty dancers, these beautiful girls. And we used to drink in the same pub on a Friday and a Saturday night. And I remember he had a pyramid of vodkas and he was pouring his Red Bull in it. You meant to do it with champagne. And I remember he said to my missus, he pointed at me and went, does he earn 100 grand a week yet? And she just went, no, but he works for the Sun. You can see the colour run out of his face. And we got on well after that.
I think a lot of things, what you see on the field is completely different off it.
Yeah.
And I think it's like that most people.
There we go. Right, Ian, your question. Here we go. Have a listen to this.
Ian, do you get nervous when you take a manager to task in a press conference?
Was that Hayley McQueen that asked that?
That sounded,
Is that my wife?
Yeah.
Yes, actually. Not nervous in terms of not nervous. You know, you were telling the story on the first podcast, Mark, about worrying about what might happen if you drop the ball as you walk out for your Champions League final. Not nervous from that point of view, but you definitely get a quickening of the old heart rate and a little bit of a dryness in the mouth when you know that the question that you're going to ask is a big question and will not be received well. So, you've got to deliver that question properly. You've got to deliver it respectfully, but confidently. And you've got to word it the way that you want to word it, because any slight variation from what you really want to say can essentially give the manager an opportunity not really to answer that question, but to answer a different question. Mm-hmm. So you've got to make sure you get it right. And then, of course, it depends on the answer. Go back to one that back and forth that I had with Erik ten Hag in the Old Trafford press room at the start of last season. Liverpool had just schooled Manchester United 3-0. Yep. And Ten Hag is sitting there essentially trying to make excuses, say that everything will be okay.
Well, Ian, hold fire there, because we can actually play the clip, right? So have a little listen to this. This is the moment we're talking about.
What makes you confident that it's players that are the problem and not your coaching?
So what do you mean? Tell me then, explain me. Maybe you can explain me which mistakes we make regular.
Well, constantly turning the ball over in your own half, playing the ball out from the back, getting mugged, chances come on the back of it, counter-attacks when you're outnumbered, giving up endless chances in your own stadium against the team's biggest rivals. With the greatest respect, we've been seeing that for so long now.
You are sure?
Absolutely.
I don't think otherwise you wouldn't win trophies as we did and to beat big opponents. So I'm sorry for you. I have another vision.
You wouldn't, with the greatest respect, you played brilliantly against City in that final. You almost lost to Cambridge in the semi-final. I mean, come on, let's have a realistic view of what happened there.
I think we won after City the most trophies in English football. So I'm sorry for you.
Right, the YouTube comments from that clip, Mr. Ladyman. This reporter needs a raise. Not heard a journalist ask a good question to a Manchester United manager in about 10 years. That's a journalist. Shout out to Ian Ladyman. Might have lady in his name, but he spoke like a real man of integrity, unlike a certain Dutch manager. So a rare example of social media being kind there, but goes to show you it's not in your interests to shirk a difficult issue.
Two things there is that I walked out of that press conference thinking one thing, which I'd made a mistake. The mistake I made was not that clear on that audio. He was trying to throw the fact they'd won the FA Cup at me. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to say, yeah, but you almost got done by Coventry in the semi-final. And I got the team wrong. I said Cambridge. So as I walked back to my car, all I could think in my head was, you're going to get murdered on social media because you've just got Cambridge mixed up with Coventry.
Yeah,
you're going to, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing. Get your facts right. Mm-hmm. And in fact, so you leave social media alone until the next morning. And then next morning you think, right, I better have a look. And I had a look and it was all that type of comment that you mentioned, on the whole, with the odd nasty one thrown in. But there was a lot of that. That is so rare. I think that said a lot for the way that people were looking at Ten Hag at the time. But the point with that exchange is that he obviously thinks, right, I've been asked a question that I don't like, so I'm going to put this journalist on the spot and ask him to back up his question, and he won't do it. Mm-hmm. He'll panic, he'll feel nervous, he'll take a step back. And I just wasn't going to do that. I was very, very sure in what I thought, very sure in what I'd seen. I've been seeing it in Ten Hag's United team for week after week after week. I already had it in my head. So I just told him He asked me to back it up, so I backed it up. When that happens, you can feel the room go, and everyone's like, oh, okay, we're on here, we're on. But as far as I was concerned, and this is another thing, sorry, Mark, I know you want to say something, is that back in the day, when press conferences were just written press and the manager and the TV people would do their stuff elsewhere, when it wasn't all on camera, that stuff used to happen all the time. Yep. All the time. Because that, to me, is what I would call a robust exchange.
Conversation, yeah.
That is what press conferences should be.
I'm with you. 100%.
But they've become so stage-managed press conferences now. It's very difficult to have that type of back and forward.
But surely that's what everybody wants. Mm-hmm. You know, you want your honesty. You want to ask the difficult question. Why should you, from the past, what you've said, for example, you were barred from Manchester United's press conference. What? Because you've said something that is not correct in their eyes. Football fans around the world, when they watch press conferences, they want the question. Why is that player not playing? Has he got discipline trouble? Or what you've found out, why shouldn't he be able to ask that question? That's what the fans want.
And clubs have tricks now. And what they do now happens a lot. It doesn't happen at United, actually. It happens a lot. Is they pass a microphone around so that it's picked up for the TV cameras. And what they do is they give you the microphone to ask you a question. But then once you've asked it, they take
Turn
it
it
off
off.
you, so you don't
You
get a
can't get a
follow-up
second,
question.
yeah.
So how can you have a conversation if there's no follow-up?
Yeah.
Or sometimes they'll say one question each, no follow-ups. That's not a press conference.
It's not, is it?
That's
No.
just a series of unrelated questions.
I agree with
So
you.
you don't get the flow.
And that's why probably people switch off from them,
And
because I
clubs-
think it's a great thing now, especially for football fans. They want to watch the press conferences because they want to learn what is going to be, if there's injuries for the weekend, or what the team's going to look like, if they're going to sign any new players. It's a great info for a fan to learn about their football club.
It is if it's allowed to flow properly.
yeah.
If it's just presented as some kind of stage managed
Right.
Q&A like it used to be with the Blooming Miss World contestant back in the day.
Yeah.
What's your favourite subject at school? What's your
World
favourite
peace.
country in the world? What you're going to get?
It's nothing.
So there's a balance to be found. I think at the moment the way that football's going, clubs are worried about managers saying interesting things. They want their managers to be anodyne and boring because
Safe,
that and
media
safe
trained, yeah.
because that doesn't get them onto the first item on Sky Sports News or onto the top of Mail Online. It keeps them kind of under the radar, and that's where they want to be. That's not where the fans want them to be. Fans want answers because they want the answers, the questions answered that they would ask themselves.
Have you ever done any media training though? Have you ever been called in to give advice?
Not to players, but to up and coming managers. I
Right,
have.
okay.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
It's your fault then, isn't it?
No, actually not.
Because I bet the advice you give is the same as what I
No,
would give, and
not-
it's be honest and be yourself.
And also engage.
Engage, yeah.
Engage. Don't see journalists, whether it be written journalists, TV journalists, radio journalists, don't see journalists as the enemy. Engage with the media. Use the media. Because the media, as you know, Gordon, we're very malleable.
Yeah.
We're quite happy to do someone's bidding for them if we think that it's going to work for us in terms of
Reciprocal,
access
yeah,
or whatever,
yeah,
as long as it's kind of within the right parameters. Use us, be friendly with us, don't be scared of us.
You've got to have to be careful, football, because if we've just talked about the Ballers League, for example, all these YouTubers, they have speak a lot on their social media platforms. They do interviews during the Ballers League. And the fans are engaging because they're honest, they don't care. Yeah. But now football fans are starting to switch off because it's the manager is scripted in what to say.
Look at Graham Potter at West Ham. Graham Potter, really bright guy, nice guy, good coach, progressive coach. Will do a good job at West Ham if he's given time in the right environment, which he probably won't be. But for some reason, every press conference he gives at West Ham, he looks like he wants to have a fight with the world.
It's bad,
and I'm
isn't it?
thinking, Graham, what's happened to you, mate?
Where's that come
happened
from?
to you? Well, I think Chelsea happens to him.
Is that Chelsea's
I think
changed
so.
Yeah.
Can I give you one bit of advice, Ian, quickly?
Yeah.
Don't say when Potter leaves, West Ham will get relegated.
Right. I think it's my turn now. So here's a question I've got to answer.
Gordon, which celebrity interview has made you more nervous than any other?
There's been a few. There's a good story here, actually. So almost 20 years ago, and it involves the Daily Mail, I got offered a job to come and work for the Mail on Sunday through a guy who worked at the Sun's brother, Andy Dillon's brother.
Dave Dillon. Know
Dillon,
Dave very
yeah.
well.
So
Edits for the Mail on Sunday.
I went in to see the boss at the Sun and said, look, I've been offered double my money to go and work for the Mail.
Obviously a lie.
Can't really turn that around. Exactly. I've been offered a bag of Pippa Down Your Mouth so much, and I was in. And she said, no, you're not. You're going to be the next Bazaar editor. And I was like, right, fair dues. That's a job that I'd quite like. And she said, not just that, Gordon. To make sure you stay, you can have a 2-week holiday anywhere you like, but wherever you go, I want you to bring back a story. And I was like, fair deal. So I went to Los Angeles, right? And my missus couldn't come the first few days, so I had a few days off the leash to start off with. So I flew,
Shame.
and fair play, it was back in the days of decent money, so I flew first class to LA. I thought, I'll get an interview there, no bother. Let's just say I got my first story in the lounge at the airport because...
On the way out or the
On the way out.
Right.
On the way out. Gary Barlow was at the lounge. I was like, all right, Gary, how you doing? And he was a bit shifty. He was like, what are you doing here? I went, I'm going on holiday for a couple of weeks. And as I was speaking to him, Howard Donald walked up beside him. I was like, oh, that's a coincidence. Howard, that you're here. As Jason Orange walked up next to him, I was like, fucking hell, lads, this is more than a coincidence, is it? As Mark Owen walked in.
Robbie would be in the loo, I presume.
And I was like, lads, is this what I think it is? And they're like, I take that, getting back together. We're going to shoot the first single for the reunion. And I was like, any reason you're going to do that in LA, boys? Because Robbie lived there. Anyway, my first story was take that, getting back together. So anyway, I got leathered on the plane, got to LA, and a mate of mine said, come on, we'll go for dinner in Chateau Marmont. I went to Chateau Marmont, And I'm thinking, this is a piece of piss, this job, isn't it? You just do things at, an expensive level and you meet the right folk. And I was having dinner and Ant and Dec happened to be there. They were filming the remake of You Bet for American telly. And they're like, fucking hell, what are you doing here? And I said, I've just got a new job, so I've got a couple of weeks holiday before it starts. They're like, oh, well done, mate, that's great news. And they sent a bottle of champagne over. So I'm now 10 hours drinking deep, a bottle of champagne deep.
Bit of jet lag.
And I'm going to the bog. And, that first night when you've gone to LA, it's quite bad in the jet lag. And as I've walked up, Robbie Williams walked past and went, what are you doing here? And I was like, oh, just over for a couple of weeks, Robbie. But I've weirdly got in a conversation about football. I said, I've got my boots with me, Hollywood United. Any chance of a game? And he went, yeah, actually, we're playing on Tuesday if you're up for it. So I'm like, yeah, I've got my boots, let's have a game. Anyway, he goes back to his table, I go back to my table. 5 minutes later, Robbie comes steaming across the restaurant. He's like, you fucking never told me you work for the Sun, trying to infiltrate my fucking football team. How dare you're here to spy on me, aren't you? And I was like, listen, Robbie, you got the wrong end of the stick. I'm here for 2. I can't believe the crack I'm having. You need to calm down. This is a Saturday night, right, in LA, a busy restaurant. And he's shouting at me. Everyone stopped and's looking. I said, look, come on, outside. And I think he took that as the wrong kind of outside. So we end up outside, nose to nose. And you know the Aesop's fable about the frog and the scorpion?
Yeah.
So he's like, frog and a scorpion. Scorpion wants to get to the other side, needs a lift from the frog, eventually persuades him as they get to the other side. And he's telling me this, nose to nose, not flinching. We are squaring up. And he says, Scorpion gets to the other side, stings the frog dies. The frog says, as he's dying, what'd you do that for? And he says, it's because I'm a scorpion, it's what I do. I'm like, Robbie, what are you on about? He went, I've sold 65 million records. Don't tell me you're not here to spy on me. And I said, Robbie, I'll be honest, I couldn't give a flying fuck. I'm here for 2 weeks holiday. I don't care what I'm going to write, that you're having a night out in a posh hotel. I couldn't give a shit. And he went, throw the first punch. So anyway, I'll leave it there, but there's an altercation, right, that doesn't end particularly well. The manager then comes over a little bit later and says, you need to leave. Robbie's a resident of the hotel. As a resident, he can get you to leave. So anyway, as I left, I said, can I leave a letter for Mr. Williams, please? And I said, dear Frog, I'm going to be the next editor at Bazaar. That might go on for quite a while. So I think it's probably in both of our interests that we get off to a better start than this. I'm prepared to ignore this horrible altercation if you're prepared to apologise. The Scorpion, here's my details. Never heard from him. Never wrote about it. I never wrote about it because I thought, fuck, that's a bad way to get off. I've got a few years ahead of me. About maybe 8 months later, I got a phone call on my mobile from an LA number, and it's Robbie, and he said, I owe you an apology. I've got a new album coming. I'm going to send it to you. Give it a review. Say whatever you like, but let's see how we get off. There's a first part of the apology. Sent the album. I did the first review. It was a reasonable album, Intensive Care. He phoned me the next day. It went out, and he said, right, you can be trusted. Everyone says you're all right. Come round to my house, Chelsea Harbour. Tomorrow afternoon, you've got the whole afternoon. Ask me anything you like. So I turned up, and I turning up thinking, the last time I saw you, we may or may not have been rolling around the floor, right? So I walked up thinking, this could be the greatest ever, like, sting. I could walk in there and get a hiding off him and Johnny Wilkes or whatever it is. I was worried about it, and I went in, and he had a crate of Red Bull. I'll never forget it. So 24 cans of Red Bull and 4 packets, 20 decks of Benson and Hedges. And he drank all of the Red Bull and smoked all of the fags. And I sat there for 5 hours, and we got a full week series of Robbie Williams. I'm a drug addict. I've been in rehab. So we got 4 front pages off the bounce. But that day, that was a long way round to saying I was.
You know the moral of that story is, don't you?
That. What's that?
You should just have joined the Mail on Sunday. None of that would have happened.
Or travelled economy.
So there's the answer
So
to
you
that
took your
question.
football boot. You actually took your football boots to LA.
I took my football boots to LA.
So I guess you didn't play in the match, no?
I did. I played for Hollywood United. Aye. It was amazing as well. But there were 2 teams. There was Hollywood All-Stars and Hollywood United, and I played for Hollywood
Your
United.
mouldies for the hard surfaces of California.
They were Copa Mundials.
Yeah, very
And I played beside Frank Leboeuf,
Ah,
which was one of the greatest moments I've ever had in football.
I remember interviewing Jurgen Klinsmann before the last World Cup for Qatar. It was on Zoom. It was through the BBC. I was in my, because he was a pundit for the BBC. I was in my kitchen in Didsbury, Manchester. He was in his kitchen in California. His kitchen is slightly bigger than mine. And,
it will be with Wicks.
So far, watch this space. And I remember he told me that he was still playing 5-a-side football in with some pals on it. And I just thought to myself, imagine turning up for your regular game of five-a-side football in Long Beach or wherever you're on. Jurgen Klinsmann's on the opera.
Amazing.
Brilliant, eh?
Lovely.
Fabulous.
Absolutely brilliant. I mean, Frank LeBouf was one of them. What a cultured player. It was a joy to play
Another
beside
good
him.
Chelsea defender, yeah.
Maybe that's a podcast for another day, but I've had the chance to play in a few of those. I played in Mark Bright's testimonial at Selhurst Park, and I played centre-half beside Ralph Little. It was a good team, actually. Dean Holdsworth played for us. Can't remember who else was in the team. But they put Dookie Friedman and Clinton Morrison on for the second half, who were still playing at that point.
Wow. Yeah.
And fucking hell, it was a run around that. But I loved it. What a treat.
I think we could start a spin-off podcast, kind of celebrities I've fought.
Yeah,
with
celebrities
Gordon
I've
Smart.
actually.
I've only got one claim to fame about playing, because I was a ref, wasn't I? Refs can't play.
Yeah.
2018, working for TV in Russia, and we had a five-a-side competition. Ryan Giggs had a team. Ian Dowie, a lot of them, all of them. And what they did was all the guys behind the scenes picked one of the players that they wanted. And for some daft reason, a lot of the guys behind chose me. So we had a team, and we ended up beating Ryan Giggs' team on penalties in the final.
Oh, amazing.
So I claim to fame that I actually won something playing football. I did nothing, eh?
Did you score your penalty?
I didn't need to take it because I was the last one. I was breaking it because I didn't want to let the lads down. But lucky enough, they'd missed enough, so we didn't have to. I didn't have to take the last pen.
Do you know there's a great nickname in Glasgow? You call a lad 11 Arif because he's always won better than 10 Arif. And you have just 11 Arif'd my story spectacularly.
So take this back to where we started. Did you see that John Terry story recently about the Champions League final and the missed penalty? That one of the Chelsea players, can't remember who it was, Makelele it was, saying that JT wasn't supposed to take that penalty.
Yeah.
That penalty was supposed to go to Solomon Kalou. That was the order. But Terry, for whatever reason, decided, no, I'm going to have it. The way that Makelele tells it is that Terry was trying to hero it, thinking, right, I'm Mr. Chelsea, I'm the captain, I'm going to take it. He basically bumped himself up the order to take it. I've got a slightly more generous take on it, which is that he's the captain. He probably thought, this is a massive moment. I'm the captain.
Yeah.
I'm going to be generous towards him. But apparently he bumped up. So had they stuck to the order, they might have won more Champions League and Man United may have won less.
What a brilliant way to analyse your take on football, right? As a captain, is that leadership, taking the responsibility, taking the pressure off Kalou, or is it grandstanding? In mitigation, I think the fact that he later put his Chelsea strip on
for the other final
might give you the answer. I don't know.
I'm going to still go with Mr. You know, whatever the what's the banner? It's captain, leader,
legend, leader.
Yeah,
I've had that. Yeah,
I think you let your strikers take the penalties.
Oh well,
that's leadership.
Yeah, but if you're confident, if you're really confident in a penalty shootout, then
what we need to do is hear from Kalou.
Boys,
we need to
he's probably thinking what I did in that final, thinking I'd want to take it.
See what Kalou says about it.
That's what you need to. Like, and again, I'm going to quote every Scottish dressing room this weekend. You can only pish with the cock you've got. Is what I was always told in football. Let your talent be talent. That's what I would say. Right, every week we're going to do this then, right? It's all-time players. We're going to do a 1 to 11 over the forthcoming weeks, and we will, as tradition dictates, start with number 1 in goalkeepers, right? So an all-time 11 from each of us, starting with the goalkeeper, Mark Clattenburg. Who would you go with?
Peter Schmeichel.
Straight off the bat.
Straight off. Absolute world-class goalkeeper. And it was that type of era when I was watching football and his shot saving and everything about him was world-class. For me, he's my goalkeeper.
Not Pavel Sarnicek?
Shea Given.
So you're pretty convinced about that? Absolutely, no doubt, Schmeichel.
Oh, Schmeichel was one of the best.
Yeah.
If not the best.
What?
There was other goalkeepers.
What was it like to referee?
Not so bad.
Not bad,
Not bad.
Because he's an imposing human being.
Huge, but the shot stopping was just incredible,
wasn't it? Yeah. Close. Also, when he was 1-on-1, I think that was his.
Unless you were David Suka, where you just think, or even Philip Albert.
Yeah.
That famous
Philippe Albert, what a great goal. Was that the 5 now?
I'm not going to say much about it.
Okay.
We once employed very briefly Peter Schmeichel as a columnist at Mail Sport back in the day, 20 years ago. And obviously he played for United, he played for Manchester City, which some people forget. And we just started with him as a columnist. I was doing his column. This was the first one he was going to do before a Manchester derby. So I got him on the phone and said, right, Peter, you've played for United, you've played for City. Let's kind of analyse the 2 goalkeepers and let's talk about your experiences. To which he said, I'm not really sure that's something I want to get into. It was the shortest. It was the shortest column. It was
Yeah.
the shortest columnist lifespan I've ever. I was like, Peter, I might have to just call you back.
Yeah.
Rang the said, right, let's just can it.
Yeah,
That
get
was
rid of it.
End of column.
Really done.
Yeah, thanks for that, Peter.
That's a nightmare, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolute nightmare. What about you then, Ian? Who's your number one?
I thought it was Michael. Gianluigi Buffon, Italian legend, 176. I had to check it, which right. 176 caps for Italy. Star for Juventus, won Serie A endless times. What an imposing figure. Beautifully good-looking man. Charismatic. Played until he seemed to play forever. Can't remember many mistakes that he made. The type of guy, if I had him in my team, it's one of those where you'd line up at kickoff and you turn around and you see him in there, you think, yeah, we're going to be all right.
Yeah, there we go. Good.
What a superstar.
Gives you strength at the back, yeah.
What a superstar.
You, Gordon?
Right, I feel very lucky to have seen some good keepers. Like Jim Leighton was a good Hibs goalkeeper, Andy Gorham. I like the flair in goalkeepers and the madness. So John Burridge was the first Hibs goalkeeper I saw. Used to walk around in his... Yeah, he was at Newcastle.
Yeah,
He used to walk around in his hands in the 18-yard box warming up, which was great when you were young watching a goalkeeper. So I loved all the characters. And actually in that, I'm going to go for Neville Southall, because I think he was such a club legend, but he could have played anywhere and been incredible. And I got to play with him. And even as an older, bigger lad, you could just see how formidable he was. He had a composure and a confidence about him that you just felt as somebody playing in front of him. And I'd have loved to have been his teammate. I think he's a great, honourable, phenomenal man.
Like a few players who played in that great Everton team from the 80s, subsequently a little bit underrated. You could put people like Kevin Ratcliffe and Derek Mountfield and Trevor Steven and people like into that bracket. And I think he is underappreciated because of who he played for and because he played for Wales and not England or even Scotland. Yeah. And I think subsequently because of the life he's led subsequently, he's obviously quite big on social media. Now, isn't he? He's become quite a big chap, as you know. None of that points towards kind of legendary athletic status. But the fact is, like you say, when he played, he was pretty much the best of his time.
Do you know, I love spending a lot of time with ex-players, and Pat Nevin always said there was something about Neville Southall that was different. Yeah, and I always think that's a good measure, isn't it? When players say he was just a level above. There was something about.
Remember the time he sat out the half-time tea talk? Refused to, because they were playing so badly. Didn't go in, just went and sat leaning up against the goalpost for the whole of the half-time.
Boys, it's been an absolute pleasure. So there we go. We've got Schmeichel, Buffon and Neville Southall, an unlikely threesome, much like the three of us, Mark Clattenburg, Ian Ladyman and Gordon Smart. Remember, get in touch, Whistleblowers Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Whistleblowers Podcast, and X at Blowers Pod. We need to let Mark Clattenburg go, but before he can go, he has to blow the full-time whistle. Shite whistle, that.
That's P or P list.
Suck.
Dog whistle.
If you want to watch more episodes of Whistleblowers, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll keep you up to date all the way through the summer with everything that's happening in the world of football.